Royalists, well, it's great to be back. I've tested your patience in recent days. I know I was in London back at the trial again because Evan Harris was appearing today, and I wanted to be there and hear what he had to say. Wasn't that relevant to Harry. Might do something on it later on. But production values, I must confess, have been lacking. Haven't had my lovely camera and microphone and lights. And most importantly, I haven't had Ben, and that has been painful. It has been painful, but a lesson has been learned. And I appreciate those of you who remarked on how much better it is when we have Ben, when we have the camera, when we have the microphones. And anyway, I didn't think I was going to do another live today. But I could not resist it because there is some incredible news, just very casually, absolutely classic Palace, classic, you've seen this all before. So the Stents in the Times that's just published, ostensibly a piece ahead of ex-Prince Andrew's 66th birthday. Where is he? What does the future look like for him? And then just 4 paragraphs down, talk about burying the lead. Kate Manzi reports that that he basically might not be moving into Marsh Farm after all. So just to set this in context, obviously, I'm sure everybody watching this channel is well aware of the backstory to this. Andrew was living in his fabulous home on the Windsor Park estate, Royal Lodge. He has lived there for many years, paying no rent. It finally emerged that he was paying no rent. As part of the defenestration of Andrew, a deal was made with Andrew, which you won't read about in the UK papers. They'll all say that the king was steely and enforced it all on him. But a deal was made with Andrew where he was basically bought out of the remainder of his lease on Royal Lodge, which was worth a lot of money, and agreed to move to a private property in Sandringham. Now, at the time, the palace, to be totally fair to the palace, did not say that it was Marsh Farm that he was moving to. They said that they were declining to say where he was moving to. My God, look at that painting. Do you know, the weird thing is that painting actually doesn't, on my wall, look straight. But I suppose it's the angle of the camera. Maybe that's even worse. There. Sorry about that. And that they never said specifically that he was moving to Marsh Farm. They just said he was moving to a private property on the Sandringham estate. And I think we now see why there was some caginess from the palace, that obviously this hadn't been signed off. It hadn't been signed, sealed and delivered. Because now it looks like Andrew doesn't want to move in there after all. And frankly, who can blame him? It looks like a pretty ghastly, grisly place, somewhat dilapidated, next to a public road, empty for a decade since the death of its last occupant, a farmer who haunts it. Well, I made that bit up, though, but empty since the death of its last occupant, who was a farmer some years ago. It's been undergoing extensive renovation to make it fit for Andrew. There's been great photos and stories in the Sun. And by the way, it was the Sun that originally broke the story that he was going to be moving to Marsh Farm, that's the plan. Because as I was saying, there's the TV installation van parked on the you can see that's the kind of single track road that leads up to Marsh Farm. So so to be fair to the palace, they never said he was moving in there, but they certainly haven't done anything to counteract the narrative. And when people initially speculated that Andrew might move to Wood Farm, which is a very nice house, actually literally the lands of Wood Farm and Marsh Farm almost adjoin. They're actually very close to this little village called Wolferton that is within the sort of boundaries of the Sandringham estate. When people initially suggested he might move to Wood Farm, which is a very nice house where Prince Philip spent the last few years of his life, and the Queen used to kind of go there as a holiday house, that was very much slapped down, and we were told, no, won't be moving to Wood Farm, won't be moving to Wood Farm. Then the son got hold of this Marsh Farm thing, and this narrative has totally been allowed to run by the palace. We're told Andrew's going to be moving out by his birthday. He's going to be moving out by the end of the month. And I think that now here in this story in the Times about, Prince Andrew, ostensibly a story about Prince Andrew's 66th birthday, suddenly 5 paragraphs down, Kate Mansi reports the move is now in doubt. She says that one issue appears to be security, and I would say that that's a concern that I think was always very obvious, given A, that everybody absolutely hates Andrew because he's accused of paedophilia, and B, that it's completely on a public road, as you can see by all these photographs that keep being taken, right? British law, if you're on a public road, you can take a photograph of anything you can see from that public road. You do not have a reasonable expectation of privacy if your garden can be seen from a public road. Somebody is allowed to take a photograph of it. So that's why they've been putting up all these enormous fences, all these new CCTV systems. But then, very intriguingly, the story by Kate Mansi in the Times says that others, and that is the word she used, others have questioned whether the accommodation is appropriate for such a high-profile figure. Well, as I wrote in Substack, they understood to include Princess Anne, who, as I understand it, is, she's always very unhappy at sort of any suggestion that the royal family should be downgraded or become kind of, she's very old-fashioned, put it that way, very never complain, never explain, and she felt that this was the wrong track to go down. But I think that another voice who will be concerned about what is going on is Prince Edward. Why? Well, because Prince Edward, a family of 4, lives in a house with, checks notes, 120 rooms. He lives in a house with 120 rooms. That's 30 rooms per person. Bagshot Park, where he lives, was built for Queen Victoria's second son, I think, not the chap who became Edward, of the Edwardian age, but the second son. Thank you very much for that incredibly generous donation. It all helps keep the lights on here at Royalist Tower. And my tie, I know I've mentioned this before, my tie was made by my mum, who's a very talented clothes designer called Valerie Goad, who you can Google. She doesn't do any stuff anymore, so you can only buy her stuff vintage. Very, very highly desirable. So, okay, just to get back to this, I would say that 30 rooms per person is quite a lot of rooms, Now, I know Edward and Sophie do jolly good work, but so do lots of other people on the planet, and they don't get houses of this magnificence and grandeur. And the issue is that much like Andrew, who was living quietly at Royal Lodge, nobody really knew his arrangements until the king started kicking up a fuss and the press started focusing on it. Now the press have moved on to what is Edward doing. And the reality is that Edward is basically on a very, very similar deal to what Andrew was on, which is that there was a sort of upfront payment of a couple of £1 million. And, from then on, it's a peppercorn. It's a peppercorn. It's free. And, you look at all the houses that Royal has. There's this other house, called Garden Cottage in Richmond Park, that a sort of distant cousin of the Queen, Princess Alexandra, lives in, that's, again, just a very elderly lady. So no one's suggesting she should move out. But it just, it's just the way that it's so badly managed. And so now, okay, if we have a situation that it looks like Andrew is able to start, as Robert Hardman said in his biography of the Queen, he said that Andrew always had a habit of agreeing to stuff and then coming back and rearranging the furniture. And that is what it looks like. It looks like Andrew is once again rearranging the furniture. And I strongly suspect that the reason they didn't at the time say he is moving to Marsh Farm, or didn't brief out he is moving to Marsh Farm, which they didn't, and I have to say it was an exclusive by Matt Wilkinson at The Sun, who revealed that he was moving to Marsh Farm. People did not know where he was moving to. This was not briefed out by the palace. But and I think we see now the reason that it wasn't briefed out is because Charles hasn't managed to lock it down. Charles has not managed to lock it down. And I just think, I know I am a bit of a Charles basher, but I do think that he's just been so incredibly weak throughout this whole story. I think he was incredibly weak from the beginning when, he didn't really take action against Andrew in a suitable and timely way, like William was urging him to. And I think that it now turns out that, guess what? Like, unlike the Queen, right, who got Megxit done in a week, right? Do you remember the Sandringham summit? She said, I want this sorted in a matter of days, and I want everybody signed up to it, and I want every detail agreed. Now, it's not her fault that Meghan and Harry have gone back on the agreement not to use HRH, and that Meghan is using HRH, but basically, everything that she put in place for Megxit at the Sandringham Summit in January 2020 in a week was signed, sealed, and agreed. And it looks like Charles didn't get that. It looks like Charles just kind of, I assume that the eventual contract or the eventual agreement, included a payout for Andrew and included a pension for Andrew. Well, I know that it included a pension for Andrew, and I know that it included a payout for Andrew. But I suspect that in terms of its accommodation, it was very vague. And it just said, a suitable place will be identified, subject to the best efforts and goodwill of both sides or something like that. And it really struck me the other day that The Sun, who've been very much on this story and have got a reporter down there, and obviously they have the resources to do that. The Sun said the other day that he went down there for the first time last week to measure the curtains, as they put it, which was quite an amusing way of putting it. The idea of Andrew wandering around with his tape measure, wondering how his giant bits of furniture from Royal Lodge would squeeze into this horrible little cottage, pokey little cottage. And I thought it was quite interesting that seemed to be the first time that he'd actually been photographed going down there. And I think that obviously what has happened is that he went down there and went, absolutely no way, I'm not accepting this. This is not, no deal has been made, and I can stay in Royal Lodge until October. We all know that actually he's not due out of that place. The notice period was a year. That has emerged. So this is a very, very perilous moment for the king, I would argue, because if Andrew succeeds in wriggling out of the punishment that his brother has set for him, it means Charles just looks so incredibly weak, and he's looked so weak throughout his reign. And great, good for him doing his TV shows about the environment and having these causes that he cares about, and good for him, honestly, battling cancer and doing really well in it. We've all got friends and family who've been in that place, and it's a hard place, and good for him. But on the basis of the discipline of the family and the control of the family, Charles is not doing great. Everything's a bit out of control. William and Catherine, are doing their own thing. They're not showing up to his big premiere. William is giving interviews to Canadian comedians saying there's going to be big changes when he comes to power. letting it be known that he completely disagrees with his father and is not going to obey his father on the absolutely pivotal issue of reconciling with Harry, right? And this is underneath all of the problems that Charles has. The biggest problem is this argument with his heir about what is the appropriate thing to do with Harry, and his heir, William, not accepting his orders and his instructions, you know, to reconcile with his brother. It's like Charles wants to bang their heads together and go, come on, boys, stop being so silly. And William's like, you know, anytime he comes to the country, oh, I appear to have an engagement in Scotland. I mean, it's taking things a little bit far. It's quite amusing there, trying to figure out how far he can get from London when Harry's in London. So, yeah, so I'm going to have a sip of my tea. Excuse me, my lovely Royalist mug. I hope my microphone's not so good that you can hear me gulping my tea. Okay, so what does this look like for Charles if Andrew manages to rearrange the furniture on this issue? It doesn't look at all good. It makes him look weak. Also, I think what we are seeing now is very careful and determined PR from Andrew's side about trying to reframe the narrative a little bit and get a little bit of sympathy and try and get some of it back to his side. There's a lot of stories going around about, oh, everybody's terribly concerned about his mental health. He's had his guns taken off him. He, you know, blah, 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 blah. He can still shoot, by the way, because, and actually the thing about the guns being taken off him is not actually to do with his mental health. It's about the change. It's about moving home. So you have to change where your guns are registered if you're moving. But that's a detail, because the PR that is going out from Andrew's side is actually very clever now. And it's, you know, this has gone too far. The guy has not been found guilty of anything. This has gone too far. And as Andrew Loney was talking about the other day to me when talking about Andrew, he was saying, you know, the PR is becoming very noticeable. It's gone too far. Virginia Giuffre was a sex worker. You know, nothing's ever been proven against him, etc., etc., etc. And this is what Andrew actually wrote. And then, of course, there are the photographs of Beatrice riding with her daughter, so Andrew's granddaughter, Sienna, in Windsor Great Park. A very, very deliberate gesture, designed for the cameras, designed to be captured by the cameras, and designed to, I think, transmit to us a sense that, his daughter still trusts him to be around his grandchildren, right? So he can't be that bad a guy, or, he's a grandpa like everybody else, and gives the guy a break, etc., etc. Here he is just trying to get on with his life and see his family. That's definitely what they are trying to push. And this is what Andrew Loney wrote about it, which I thought was good. And I'm going to try and get Andrew on to talk about it later this week, actually, about this new development about basically ex-Prince Andrew, to distinguish him from Andrew Loney, about ex-Prince Andrew saying he won't move it into Marsh Farm. So this is what Loney wrote about it. Andrew's PR fightback is now in full swing, and the photographs of him riding with Beatrice and his granddaughter Sienna appear to be part of a coordinated rehabilitation effort. So he says, there have even been reports that he is devastated that his supposedly modest home will not accommodate his collection of teddy bears. This is familiar York playbook. And of course, Andrew Loney would know all about that, having literally written the book on it. Yes. Anyway, so look, that's really the end. It was just a very quick broadcast tonight, just to bring you up, because I just thought it was such an amazing piece of news. Now, I have done a quick piece on it in my Substack, and as I'll always say, please subscribe to my Substack if you feel so minded. There's more, a little bit more detail in there. And, you know, where does this end up? If it ends up with Andrew running rings around the king again, I think it's a very, very bad look for the king. I think this is the problem that's not going to go away. I know that Andrew Loney is updating his book as we speak, getting ready for the paperback to come out probably in 6 to 8 weeks. You know, there is a lot of trouble still that Andrew can cause the family. And if he's not going to go quietly, and, you know, he's not going to go quietly to a house that he considers like massively below his dignity. And, you know, like, I wouldn't mind living at Marsh Farm at all. It's like a really pretty nice house. But I suppose when you've come from Royal Lodge and you come from, you know, having liveried staff and, you know, the grandeur and the respect and the deference, to be sort of shoved into a sort of slightly scruffy farmhouse, I guess, doesn't appeal to one's vanity. So just to conclude, thank you very much for being here today. Thank you very much for your lovely comments about my tie. I hope that our production values have been restored to the crystal clear sound that we are trying to deliver to you, and my lips moving in perfect synchronization with the sounds that they are producing. And please, may I ask you a favor? If you don't want to subscribe to the Substack, that's fine. If you want to be a free subscriber to the Substack, that's fine. You will get one newsletter a week. And if you're just more into the videos, please just remember that YouTube is completely free. I want to keep it completely free, but I can only do that if you guys keep liking and keep subscribing. And if you're feeling really generous, if you actually do like it, it'd be wonderful if you could share it with anybody. That would be marvelous. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions, Ben? 1 or 2 questions? If we have, stick them on the screen. And we'll just try and get to a couple of questions. Right. Hope you can all see that. I'll read it out anyway for those who are listening. Edward and Sophie bought the lease and they're working royals. What do you suggest happens to their home if they're moved on? Well, I mean, before they leased it, it was going to be leased out by the Crown Estate as a conference centre. And I mean, I think it would make a magnificent conference centre, but for some reason it was decided that that it couldn't be a conference centre and that it would be much better suited to be Edward and Sophie. So, like this thing, if they bought the lease, yeah, I think they paid 5 million and then renewed it for another 5 or something. But you know, like, come on. Like, that's like a year of rent. You know, like they're not paying any rent, and it's not sustainable. Like, people just, I mean, they're working royals. Like, I'm a working journalist. You're a working whatever you do. You know, like, we don't get provided like magnificent palaces. Like, I don't know. I just think those days are gone. I think William's very alive to the risks that it poses, and I think that, you know, I think that Andrew's the tip of the iceberg. I think it's the thin end of the wedge. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. If that's it, Ben, we should wrap it up and thank everybody for being here. Goodbye.